What's going on, everybody? This is FSM Football Sunday Live. We are coming to you either via Facebook Live, on Periscope, YouTube Live. If you found another way to hack into the internet, I don't know what year it is, but we're here for you, and we're here for the next hour, taking all of your lineup questions. We'll go through the slate. He's Justin Fensterman. I'm Ben Heisler. I have something in my throat, so FENSTY, as I attempt to clear my throat live on the air, there are some injury news and notes. We have a game from London currently going on. Set the stage for us heading into week number 8.
All right, as we always do to start this show, we go over the latest injury news and notes and some other notes that we're going to have to talk about as well when it comes to running back depth. And we'll start with the Buffalo Bills for Monday night, not necessarily has fully to do with today's slate, but still a big decision when you have guys going on Monday night. You don't want to be caught in a situation where you're forced to take the zero. According to Adam Schefter, LaShawn McCoy is expected to play, is expected to be ready to go. So for all of those that have been using Chris Ivory, I don't know why you have been, but it's a desperation play. Shady is back and ready to go today, so he was in the concussion protocol. So that's something to think about in a pretty decent matchup Monday night versus the Patriots here. So that's something that we should absolutely start out with here, because there are going to be a lot of impact players, especially from the Patriots side, because something else on the other side. And Ben, if your throat is clear, I'm going to need you. You might start choking on this news. But yesterday, I'm looking at the news and notes, and I'm seeing Sony Michel practicing. Like, we're talking about practicing here. This guy was a lock not to play. I spent $28 on Kenyon Barner, and yes, Sony Michel's still doubtful. But the fact that he's practicing is mind-blowing, and this is a Monday night game.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts, the fact that he's already there. We thought he'd miss at least 2, maybe 3 weeks, possibly even 4 or 5. We knew he'd be available down the stretch of the season, right? But we did not expect Sony Michel to be back up. I'd be very surprised, FENSTY, if he ends up playing Monday night. I think the Patriots, It's not like they're in a situation where they were earlier in the season where they felt maybe a little bit more pressed. So I expect somebody like Michel to probably just be questionable leading in. And for fantasy owners, I almost think this is one of those weeks where you just kind of pump the brakes on him, just keep him on the bench and try not to waste a possible roster spot that could end up getting you a 0.
Right. So, at this point, when looking at this injury down the road here, he was expected to miss this week. The fact that he's practicing, yes, your investment in Kenyon Barner, you should have known that this was going to be a 1-week rental. But you picked up Kenyon Barner with the mindset that Sony Michel's knee has been banged up for most of the season. And while we can't predict injuries, the likelihood of him getting hurt again is pretty high compared to some of the other running backs out there. So now you're good with depth. And I know that James White is still there, but I think Kenyon Barner is still a very safe start, at least for this week. Now, if for some reason, you're stuck at this point, because if I'm going to start him in my flex on Monday night, then I'm going to have to stick with him, and you're going to have to hope that he comes in and acts like a Buck Allen and is a vulture at the goal line, which is still possible, by the way.
No doubt. I see some questions coming in. That's what we want here on FSM Football Sunday Live. I see Utah's got a question for a flex PPR spot, so we'll get to you coming up in just a second. We'll get to a couple more injury news and notes here, but first and foremost, for those of you guys that are new to fantasy sports markets, hello, welcome, hey, buddy. We are a new daily fantasy sports site and content provider, but the thing that we do over at FSM that's a little bit more unique is we are non-salary DFS. You want to put together an entire Kansas City Chiefs stack? I wouldn't blame you. The Broncos have been 28th against the run this year. They've been gashed by 2 guys this season with over 200 yards. So Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Pat Mahomes, all in play. If you play them on the salary sites, you can't afford them, but you can play them at fantasysportsmarkets.com. That's right. All the money and you got nothing to worry about. And so if you guys are new to fantasysportsmarkets.com, I'm putting it on the screen. Promo code NFL18 will get you $5 on us when you go and register at fantasysportsmarkets.com. It's $5 that you can use to enter in a $5 contest. If you want to enter in our $10 contest, where first place takes home $150 with a perfect roster bonus of over $50K, that's available to you guys as well. You can add it towards that. Or if you want to play the $1 Beat Benny Heis competition for 5 weeks in a row, that is available to you guys as well. So we'll promote this throughout the show. Promo code NFL18 gets you $5 over at fantasysportsmarkets.com. One other note, Fensty, that I thought we should mention coming up for a noon game. Your New York Jets are taking on my Chicago Bears, but the Bears will be without Allen Robinson today in what is going to be a situation where Mitch Trubisky is going to have to find a couple other options because he is locked on to Allen Robinson all season.
Yeah, and he's been banged up the last couple of weeks, Ben. And on the other side for the Bears, Khalil Mack, also he's going to try to test out the ankle in warm-ups, but he's not a lock to play as well. So for those that are in desperate need of a quarterback, as much as we're giving Mitch Trubisky a look for a bye-week spot start, Sam Darnold, if especially with a banged-up Khalil Mack, Sam Darnold also kind of in play as well. He's in a few of my lineups. So this game, I'm expecting some points to be scored, not as much from the Jets side on the running side, although with Isaiah Crowell at this point, you know the volume touches will be there. With what he'll do, unsure. But now when it comes to the Bears' wide receiver depth, I mean, after Allen Robinson, I mean, Taylor Gabriel just becomes a very big option here. But then once after that, I mean, does Trey Burton's value go up? And is that someone, Ben, that you're looking to start in a lot of daily lineups?
I'm going to be looking at Trey Burton for sure. I think Taylor Gabriel was a play that I already liked coming into this week. He's developed a good rapport with Mitch Trubisky. The one guy that I've actually been waiting for, and I had higher expectations going into the start of the season for the Chicago Bears, was Anthony Miller. This is a guy that they drafted in the second round. He was a big-time possession wide receiver when he was in college. Maybe this is an opportunity to get Anthony Miller with almost no ownership. He scored a couple touchdowns already this year, but maybe this forces Trubisky to try and get on page with a guy that they're expecting to be a big part of the Bears' future moving forward. But I do like Trey Burton as well.
Yes, and with the Jets, I mean, there's going to be a lot of points scored in this game, so you are going to want a lot of shares in this game. And like I said, I think from both sides as well. I mean, the Jets have a very depleted receiving core right now. I mean, Terrell Pryor currently not on the team. Robbie Anderson, who's been doubtful, waiting for more news on him, but it's not looking good for him. So, you know, Jermaine Kearse, we thought he had a great matchup last week, but then put up a 0. So now someone you really have to look at as well, and especially those on salaried sites here, Chris Herndon. He scored the last few weeks
you're right.
The Jets, and you know that's why. But Ben, with fantasy sports markets, we don't have to worry about that at all. But for those that are now freaking out and stressing out on, hey, you want to go stars and scrubs, you want to try to get your Todd Gurley fix, Chris Herndon is a perfect complement on the other side.
All right, let's get to some of your guys' lineup questions. This first one coming up on our Facebook live stream from Utah. That's his name. I don't know if it's also his location. He wants to know whether we go with Jarvis Landry or Tyler Boyd PPR in the flex. Here's the thing, Fensty. You get two guys that have been getting a ton, and I mean a ton of volume, consistently over the course of the year. Landry, you can almost guarantee he's going to get 10 targets from Baker Mayfield. He's locked onto him throughout. Finally got himself going last week with that late touchdown for Cleveland against Tampa Bay, where everybody was playing the Browns. On the other side, Cincinnati's in a really intriguing spot for me. And I talked about this with Elliot Christ of the Quant Edge on the Fantasy Sports Markets podcast earlier in the week, that I think the casual fan, I think people who play DFS and fantasy football on a more regular basis are more likely to stock up on Cincinnati Bengals. But I think a lot of casual fans will say, well, they couldn't do anything against the Chiefs. If you've seen how bad the Chiefs' defense is week in and week out, you know, why would I go back to the well here? And the reality is that this is the perfect reset button for a Cincinnati offense that is talented. Tyler Boyd's a really good receiver, and I know that the target share and the ultimate receptions weren't that good last week, but I really like Tyler Boyd this week, and I think I like that matchup for him even better than Jarvis Landry this week.
I do too, Ben. I do too. Now, it's hard for me to ignore that Jarvis Landry is right now number 2 in targets this year among all wide receivers. And also, by the way, a very good matchup against Pittsburgh as well. Seeing a lot of people look at Baker Mayfield and spot starting him. But Landry, it's hard to avoid him because after Adam Thielen, he's the next name I'm seeing in the target leaders. However, I have to agree with you, especially because of a slot perspective, that Tyler Boyd does have the better matchup. And Tampa's a team that's proven once every week, every single time, that you can attack them and attack them big, that the Vegas totals are always high in these games for a reason. Right. And thinking about it from a logistics standpoint here, that A.J. Green is still the top dog and is going to see most of that coverage. Tyler Boyd's going to be free some.
Yeah, and the other thing that Elliot pointed out that I thought was a really good point is how much zone coverage Tampa plays, and Tyler Boyd has crushed zone consistently throughout the course of the year. Now, to sort of put a bow on your question, Utah, I think if you want steady, consistent guy that's going to have a really high floor pretty much every week, Landry's probably your guy. But I just think the upside for Boyd is that much better in this game, and I still think he's going to have a high floor in this game that I prefer him in this spot.
It's a good situation to be in, and I don't know who you, if this is a DFS or a seasonal question, but if it's a seasonal, whoever your flex is, unless you're really deep in running back, you may want to also consider starting the other option in that flex too.
No doubt about it. All right, let's get a Periscope question in. A guy that's checked in with us before, PD Dubs 101. Says, hey guys, I need a running back 2 for PPR. Do I go with Jalen Richard or Duke Johnson Jr.? Thanks.
Oof.
So Duke let a lot of people down last week, and I don't necessarily think it's any fault of his own. It's one of those situations, FENSTY, where for about the last month, Hugh Jackson has said, well, we need to get Duke Johnson involved. And then when they don't use him, they say, well, we still need to get Duke Johnson involved. And, after that, he said, I know we didn't get Duke involved, but we're really going to get him involved this week. Like, fantasy fans have been waiting for a long time. I've rostered Duke Johnson in several season-long leagues, expecting him, especially with Todd Haley and his offensive coordinator. This is the guy that worked with Le'Veon Bell for the last several years. You would think he knows how to use a running back in space. So I don't know whether this falls on Hugh Jackson. I don't know whether this falls on Todd Haley. I've seen some reports that Todd Haley could be on the hot seat, which makes no sense because he's the only semblance of real coaching brains in that organization. So I think if I'm going for a more consistent option, especially with no Marshawn Lynch, in a somewhat favorable matchup for Oakland, at home against the Colts, I think Jalen Richard has to be your guy today.
Oh, I am not blinking at all, and I'll try to not blink while I'm giving this analysis. Staring
that won't
contest.
Be terrifying at all.
Yes, those staring contest years, because I'm not going to blink here. With no Amari Cooper and with no Marshawn Lynch, this matchup is great, at least from the receiving side, for Jalen Richard. With Duke Johnson, we thought we were going to see it last week, and until he proves himself, I am not going to trust him. Jalen Richard is going to get a lot more touches and targets as well. I'm blinking now.
Okay. Jalen Richard also has 7 targets in his last 4 weeks. So this is a guy that was getting plenty of volume before the Marshawn Lynch injury even took place. And they're finding a way to just utilize him in the passing game. Plus, Oakland's going to be playing from behind a lot this year. That means more long-distance opportunities for Richard to be on the field, more dump-off passes. Remember, garbage time counts. It doesn't matter whether or not your team is completely out of it. If you have an opportunity to be a hero in garbage time, take advantage of it. I think Richard's going to be that guy this week.
So, Ben, I'm going to ask you this then, because I'm sure I'd be surprised if someone's not asking this question. Who do you trust more in Oakland between Richard and Doug Martin, especially for the long term?
This is an easy answer for me. It's still Richard.
Right.
Because I know Richard's role may or may not change all that much. Here's the thing. It's already a solid floor, especially in PPR, right? But the ceiling could be a lot much greater if they decide they want to utilize him more. And they talked about incorporating Dwayne Washington in the running game as well, and he's a bum. But Doug Martin's at 1,000 years old. He hasn't been good in about 3 years. I know John Gruden hyped him up, but does that make me interested in him? John Gruden hyped up a lot of people. John Gruden said that Khalil Mack was coming back.
Yeah, so whoever he hypes up next will be traded within 2 weeks, it seems like.
Right, so let's see if he ends up saying something about Derek Carr. By the way, do you think Derek Carr gets traded?
No, I do not.
Okay, I don't think so either.
Yeah, and John Gruden can gushy it up however he wants. Amari Cooper is not a consistent receiver, okay? He can say how much he loves it, but he's not. And that's why it's funny, because when I was in studio, Ben, thinking from this angle. I was in studio when this trade broke. And normally I get the whole, everyone's calling the studio, are we on this, are we doing this and that. For Amari Cooper, it was like, we'll obviously cover it, but it was like, And that's because Amari Cooper is an overhyped receiver and has been for the last few years. And that's why a lot of analysts I'm hearing are saying that him in Dallas, it doesn't change his fantasy value that much.
I'm glad you said that.
It doesn't.
No, I'm glad you said that, because he goes from a terrible situation to a still terrible situation.
Right.
Dallas is stuck in the past.
It makes, when we're talking Ezekiel Elliott in future weeks, it makes me more comfortable that now the spotlight will be off him a little bit. So as a Zeke owner, I feel like it helps me out more than anything regarding Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. Zeke is going to get a little bit less attention, but the offense is still predicated to go through Zeke Elliott. It's still
Right.
a 22 to 25 touches a game, still get 4 or 5 opportunities in the passing game as well. Prescott ends up doing well on play action. So if they can get Amari Cooper open, that's fine, but he's not going to change this offense. It's just, it's slow. It just sort of moves in the mud. I don't like it for Amari Cooper. I still think he's an insanely talented guy. I just don't think it necessarily works out well for him in this new spot. Let's get back to some of the questions. This is from Sizzle on Periscope. He's got a couple for us. Because morning, fellas. So I go with Chris Thompson, Nick Chubb, or Kerryon Johnson today in a half-point PPR. So Chubb was sort of the darling of last week, right? He gets to go on, has the ideal spot. He ended up delivering late with that touchdown, was better in the second half. Tougher matchup today against Pittsburgh, so I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be on him today, even though Cleveland has shown a propensity, FENSTY, to give their running backs a lot of volume. That makes me feel good. Chris Thompson, intriguing matchup.
Expected to play, by the way.
Is expected to play.
He is expected to play, but there's a guy named Adrian Peterson there as well, Ben. So do we have to automatically take away Chris Thompson from this equation?
Not automatically. If it's standard, I'd say yes. But I think half-point PPR puts him in play. And then there's Kerryon Johnson, who was awesome last week and is at home against Seattle as a home favorite. And a lot of those times, those correlations tend to work out in favor of the running back at home because game script is going to dictate that they're going to end up having the ball. And you've started to notice Matt Stafford and Russell Wilson, both of those guys are starting to not throw as much as they have in the past. They've sort of turned their offense into more of a running predicated offense. So I think the answer here is Kerryon Johnson.
First of all, Ben, you make a great point because early on in the season, and I studied targets a lot, and Detroit had some of the most targeted receivers in the league, the entire league. When you looked on that top 20, top 25 list, you had all 3 of them there, including Marvin Jones, who's been disappointing. But now, you're right, Ben, it's not, we saw it. Michael Roberts getting those touchdowns. That's what we're seeing more, and we are seeing a little bit more Kerryon. So for me, Ben, I'd say Kerryon's got the bigger ceiling here. Nick Chubb is the safer play to me, but Kerryon Johnson, I think overall will get more points.
Here's sort of my ideal situation, and again, Sizzle, I know you got another question. I don't wish this upon you. I kind of wish this upon me. Kerryon Johnson is somebody that I want to target as far as a second half trade is concerned. So here's what I want to see happen today, right? I want Kerryon to run for 100 yards, get in the end zone, have a nice game. But I want like 2 touchdowns vultured by LeGarrette Blount. And then the fantasy owner gets really mad, and then I'm able to get Kerryon Johnson from him.
I don't know about that. I think they'll still value Kerryon pretty highly, Ben, even if he doesn't, even if he does get vultured a little bit.
The vulture can screw with your mind so much. If all of a sudden you say, hey, I got it, somebody that's getting 90% of the goal line carries, this is the guy you should target instead of Kerryon Johnson.
Understood. No, understood. And speaking of vulture is a good way to transition before we get to Sizzle's next question here. We got a situation when it comes to, some of the other running backs, that we're talking about here. Jordan Howard, Tariq Cohen. That's a situation that I can't figure out right now, Ben. I don't know if you have a good lead on it, but it almost seems like Tariq Cohen is like the hands down safer option.
He's been the safer option in the sense that over the last 3 weeks, the matchups have really predicated fast pass-catching running backs, less of the guys that can sort of go in between the tackles, which is what Jordan Howard was. And I think people, FENSTY, don't give Jordan Howard enough credit for how good he's been over the last 2 years. He's been the second leading rusher in the NFL over the past 2 seasons. So this isn't he's not a bum. He's a good running back, but it's all about... in John Fox's system, that's what they wanted to do, and in Matt Nagy's system, they're trying to use a lot of these different versatile type of guys. Trey Burton is sort of that ideal tight end that can block, that can sort of go across the field, be a deep tight end. So I think at some point Howard is going to get it going. I think they're going to look for the right matchups. I still think he's going to be a guy that takes advantage of an opportunity in the month of December and November when it starts to get cold, and they're going to have to round and pound the ground, pound and ground the ball. I think I screwed up that expression. But the point is that I don't think he's going away. I think especially if they keep him by the trading deadline, that's a further indication that they still have plans for Jordan Howard moving forward this year.
Right. So just remember that, Ben. I agree with you too that I think Howard will pick it back up. But for now, very tough to figure out, especially from the daily side of
Exactly.
things.
Some more questions coming in. I see them from Cali Trees, from Zach. So we'll get to you guys coming up in just a second. Let's get to that second one from Sizzle. Is John Brown a must-start going forward? Half-point PPR, I have Sterling Shepard, Demaryius Thomas, and Marvin Jones. Well, based on the criteria of wide receivers that you have, I'd say yes. John Brown is heading into this week, and I'll double-check the numbers here. But I believe John Brown in PPR is the wide receiver 13 on the season this year. And this is somebody that never had that type of volume, never had that type of opportunity during his time in Arizona. I'm trying to get the information loaded up now as to where he ranks positionally. But he's been great, and I think he's absolutely must start at this point.
Right. Now, Sterling Shepard is not far behind who he mentioned.
Right. John Brown is number 16.
Right. And what
Shepard's 24.
Okay. So it's a little bit of a difference, but Shepard's starting to close that gap a little bit. He's picking it up a little bit more, but it's still John Brown a must start over those options.
Right. And I also prefer Flacco to Manning as far as getting him targets. Shepard's numbers, I worry FENSTY are going to come off a little bit skewed after that big week. I think he had 5 catches for like 160 yards and a couple broken plays. But the target share has actually been fairly good for Sterling Shepard. It actually hasn't gone down all that much, even with the return of Evan Ingram, and that was something that scared me about Shepard, and part of the reason why I considered moving on from him in a couple of different leagues.
Right, and also looking at the Vegas total for a second, not that high.
No, it's one of the lowest of the slate. And
I looked it up, and I'm like, it's the Redskins, and I'm like, oh yeah, like the Redskins did this to the Panthers a few weeks ago. And, you know how that offense moves. So I'm starting to not be that surprised in games that I'm seeing with the Redskins featured that the Vegas totals are a bit low, because when looking at some of these games, I mean, we've got Green Bay, LA, which is 57.5. You've got the Saints, Vikings at 54. I mean, this is a 44 total. I mean, even Colts, Raiders, who we just talked about, you're going to want exposure in there, and Bucks, Bengals that we love. So this is one of the lower totals on the game for a reason, Ben.
And interestingly enough, the line has gone up a couple of points in this one from 42 where it opened all the way up to 44. So it is a little bit intriguing to see that type of line movement, something that we'll keep an eye on. With both teams' implied total going up by about that's the interesting part, is that both teams' implied total have gone up a point, as opposed to one closing in and the other sort of moving away. So again, something to keep an eye on for that. The difference there in 2 points is pretty substantial. From Cali Trees 3 on Periscope, it's a standard league with a quarterback toss-up between Andy Dalton and Ben Roethlisberger.
Ooh.
That's a great toss-up because those are two of my favorite plays on the slate. We talked about Andy Dalton briefly a little bit, FENSTY, and the opportunity to go up against Tampa. Another good point, I keep referring back to Ellie because he just gives so much good information on the podcast each week. He said Pat Mahomes is your quarterback 1 as far as consistency all season long. You know who the quarterback 2 is? Anybody who's played the Bucs all season long. They've been the quarterback 2 in fantasy. If you just collect those numbers over time, they've put up quarterback 2 stats. The Bucs are dead last at stopping the tight end spot. They are dead last in the NFL at stopping wide receiver 1s, and we're dead last until last week at stopping wide receiver 2s. So the matchup is more favorable for Andy Dalton. But Ben Roethlisberger at home, coming off a bye, Steelers starting to find themselves both offensively and defensively, more weapons at his disposal, I would believe, than Andy Dalton has. I think Dalton will be the more popular play and probably the safer play.
Right.
But I think if I want a higher outside play, it's probably Big Ben.
So I agree with that. However, I'm more in on Andy Dalton for this matchup. But when it comes to the ownership, when you're trying to predict ownership here, even though people won't read into it about their last matchup, Pittsburgh-Cleveland, there were weather concerns and everything like that. And because of that, you really have to take that out of the equation because it's not going to be like that this time. So both have a great match. But I'm going to be safe and go Andy Dalton here, Ben. It's the matchup's too good to be true. And every time we try to, because we don't even try to go away from that matchup when whoever's playing Tampa.
Right. We know it's going to deliver for us.
Yeah, we're not those people that are like, well, this is the week that they're going to stalwart a team. No, it's not going to happen. You just read off they're some of the worst against position players, and because of that, I feel like we have to be safe and go Andy Dalton, especially with it being standard.
By the way, we talked about the weather today. There are there's a lot of wind in Chicago between the Jets and the Bears. Jordan Howard.
Wow.
I think,
and Isaiah Crowell. Does Isaiah Crowell now become more in play?
Ooh, you know what? I bet he does, although I still think the Bears win this game fairly comfortably.
And their run defense isn't bad. That's the thing. Their run defense isn't bad, but now with you thinking there's going to be more opportunity for Howard versus Cohen, I'm wondering from the other side if there's going to be more Crowell because of these high winds.
Right. And by the way, we were talking about the weather. There is expected to be some rain for both Cleveland at Pittsburgh and Tampa Bay and Cincinnati, too. So it's kind of a toss-up when you're dealing with the weather in that spot as well. So I think both of them are great plays. I still think the higher upside play is Ben Roethlisberger, but I will not talk you out of Andy Dalton today.
Right.
By any means. From Zach back on Facebook Live, a PPR wide receiver toss-up between Julian Edelman Monday night against Buffalo or Golden Tate at home against Seattle. So where are you leaning here?
Man, I feel like I'm forced to lean Edelman here because of this matchup against the Bills, more than because with what we just talked about with the Lions. They've become a lot harder to predict, and getting Kerryon Johnson more involved is clearly taking away from these other receivers. I think that you got to be safe here and go Edelman. I mean, as safe as you could be looking at a Patriots receiver. But here's what we could talk about here. Josh Gordon is not 100% going into this week.
Correct.
Neither is Gronk. Now, both we should expect to play, and especially Gronk with an amazing, Buffalo, everyone loves him up there. So
big narrative game for Gronk every time he goes to Buffalo, too.
But, maybe with Josh Gordon and the lack of involvement we've seen from Chris Hogan, Edelman is a safer option in that regard. What do you think?
I feel as long as Golden Tate, and he was removed from probable on Friday, he's just getting so many targets consistently each and every week for Golden Tate as I load up his target share chart over the last several weeks. I just know how reliable he is. And then again, Edelman is sort of in that same category. They're both very similar wide receivers in the sense that they're going to go across the middle. They're going to see plenty of opportunities. And I also wonder, too, if Sony Michel doesn't play for New England, how that's going to change things, if James White's going to be more of a in-between the tackles type guy, or are they going to just use him in the same role that he had before? I'm curious to know sort of what impact that's going to have on their running game, if it's going to be a Kenyon Barner type situation. Golden Tate, since September the 10th, has had 15, 13, 8, 8, 7, and 6 targets.
They've gone down a bit.
So they've gone down, but I still think that you're still looking at when you get 6 targets, and that's your lowest of the season, it's going to be a fairly reliable opportunity. So I like the matchup a little bit better against Seattle at home. Buffalo's actually been fairly good against the pass this year, but the good news for Edelman is that he won't be shadowed by Tre'Davious White.
Right.
So maybe you're right. Maybe Edelman is actually in a better spot than maybe I gave him credit for.
Also, something else, I'm seeing a lot more people, and I always look at this. I look at percentages for seasonal as well for those to see who's picking up what defenses, because as you know, Ben, and we're in leagues together, I'm a big streamer when it comes to defenses.
Yes.
I will never in auctions pay more than $1. So I'm seeing more people put faith into Seattle all of a sudden. They're not the same defense as we've seen in years past, but I'm seeing more people have an interest in spot starting them. So I think their defense, and I'm looking against wide receivers, I believe I saw that they're top 10 against wide receivers, Seattle, this year. I'm looking it up right now as we talked. I'm seeing that they're in that 6, 7, 8 range. So that makes me worry a little bit about Tate. Now, I'm still starting Tate in all the leagues I have him, but in this type of situation, that's why it's making me now, just looking that up, go even more to the Edelman side.
You know what? I think you've convinced me otherwise. I like the matchup for Tate a little bit more, and if Seattle, again, it's a revenge game for Tate, so maybe you take that into consideration a little bit as well. But I think that's a really interesting point, is sort of where they're funneling a lot of these guys as targets.
And by the way, when you're hearing everyone out there are back and forth, and it's not all about the answer. Listen to the strategy, because if something jumps out to you that we say, and despite us giving the opposite answer after that, go with what you're hearing when it comes to the notes and make your own decision. So it's not only about the answer, it's about the strategy behind it. And that's why as we answer questions, we try to also bring in other receivers and other running backs who have similar situations in either ors.
This is FSM Football Sunday Live. He's Justin Fensterman from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and Fantasy Alarm. Make sure you guys get up every Saturday morning with him to catch him on Wake Up Fantasy Sports.
You won't need any coffee. You won't need any cereal. I'm your breakfast. I'm your coffee. I'm everything for that show for you. You will be up and you will never sleep again.
It's actually true. I've gone on FENSTY show a handful of times, and I keep thinking, I'm going to go back to bed. It's like 5:30 in the morning. And then I don't, because I've had my cereal, I've had my coffee, you know, I've had my fiber, my Fiber One cereal.
Dominate the day, Ben. No other option.
And also Saturday is a great day to play daily fantasy too, because you have a bunch of NBA action. Of course, at Fantasy Sports Markets, you have top 25 college football. And it's been a really good start to NBA this year. And I know that you've been doing great over at Fantasy Alarm. Your information's been awesome. And by the way, if you guys haven't played NBA over at FantasySportsMarkets.com, highly encourage you guys to do so. FENSTY, we made a change to our lineups. We were living in the past, man. We did not have a utility spot in our rosters.
Okay.
So now we got your point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center with a guard forward and utility to close things out. We are in the modern age, and all of a sudden the lineups are looking a little bit more sexy on the main slate.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ow!
Ow! And also another friendly reminder as we sort of go on into this crazy little world that we're in. And Mark, I see your question. I just removed it, but I'll put it back on the screen. Keep your questions coming in, guys. They've been really good so far. If you guys have not played on FantasySportsMarkets.com, remember we are a non-salary DFS site. It's a great opportunity if you've been playing on the salary sites before and you've been getting a little bit frustrated that, you know, all the sharks are taking your money. These are much more small games, but still an opportunity to win some big money. Usually they range from anywhere between 6 people, upwards of 11. Some of our guaranteed contests maybe max of about 30, 35. And I was somebody that before I started working here, I was winning at FantasySportsMarkets.com. I am that example of somebody that played and had some success. And
now you're too far in and losing it.
So remember, promo code NFL18 when you guys go to FantasySportsMarkets.com and register. It's $5 on us. You can use it in whatever contest you like, but make sure you guys get in on today's NFL slate. We have early contests. We have late contests, pick 3 contests where you get to pick your favorite 3 quarterbacks of the day. Same with wide receivers and running backs. It's really a great way and a different way to play DFS, and we're excited to bring it to you guys. All right, let's get to my guy, Mark. His question from Facebook is rough week for me in one league. You ready for this one, FENSTY?
Yep, let's do it.
Duke Johnson or Ronald Jones at running back?
Oh, welcome.
Poor Mark.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh,
jeez.
What do we do here?
It's funny because just when you think that, you know, that Peyton Barber's done, he'll roll you off like 80 yards, and then you're stuck in this conundrum.
Peyton Barber won't die. Like this is just monumentally frustrating with Peyton Barber.
It is. It's just as frustrating if you've hung on to Duke Johnson that long, too.
No doubt.
Man, so if in this one...
It's tough. It's tough. We don't know what to do.
It's very tough, and you know what? I want to attack. I just haven't seen it from Duke Johnson yet. I just haven't. We've seen Ronald Jones score a little bit. Peyton Barber is playing, but is a bit banged up. So maybe Ronald Jones has a better chance of vulturing a touchdown. I mean, Nick Chubb hasn't been used that much up until the last couple of weeks. So, I mean, I just think overall, Ben, as disgusting as this is, I think Ronald Jones might be the safer play. They're both a two-headed monster here, and I think Ronald Jones might be the safer play if you're looking for the touchdown.
All right, I'm going to take a sip of coffee and sort of process what was just said. Yeah, I don't want to play Ronald Jones. I can't do it. I won't do it. I understand your perspective here. You know, you're a very thoughtful person. You've taken the time to sort of really piece a lot of this information together. Here's the thing about Pittsburgh and Cleveland today is that Cleveland's going to be down, right?
Right.
They're not a good chance of winning this game. If this is the week that Duke Johnson doesn't get more snaps and targets and opportunities, I don't know what is. This sets up so favorably for him There are going to be a lot of 3rd and longs. There's going to be plenty of dump-off passes and opportunities. Like if this isn't the week for Duke, and you probably should have moved on from him already, but this has to be the opportunity to either live by the Duke or die by the Duke. And so for one more week, I think you live by the Duke, Mark. That's where I'm going here.
And I understand that. And Ben, I didn't even say this when I was talking before. So the playing from behind factor does help Duke's prospects in this game. But yeah, this is it though. This is it. He is literally being casted away unless Nick Chubb gets hurt if he doesn't come through in this type of matchup.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, spot on.
And in standard leagues, by the way, I may be forced to go Ronald Jones.
I think so too.
A terrible situation to be in.
By the way, speaking of Tampa, and there's some news coming out of Jacksonville that's fairly intriguing as well. Did you see that Deshaun Jackson is requesting a trade?
So I was going to ask you about that. Is there any kind of narrative with that? Because you would think in the minds of Tampa Bay that if he's requesting a trade, they might try to go to him a little bit more to showcase him, to sell him.
Or they just hold him out and make sure that he doesn't get hurt.
Which would absolutely suck because I have him as a bye-week flex option this week.
You know who would actually make sense for him? The Eagles.
Oh, so there you go.
Yeah, right? Like
full circle right there.
Wouldn't it make sense with the Eagles based on Alshon Jeffrey's inconsistency and staying healthy, Nelson Aguilar being the guy in the flex? There's just not a whole lot of options at the wide receiver spot. You bring in Jackson, Carson Wentz becomes a little bit more dangerous because he can throw the deep ball. Jackson can catch the deep ball. I think that's a really interesting trade if they, and I don't know what they'd move him for, maybe like a 5th or a 6th round pick at this point. I don't know.
I mean, if Amari Cooper could get a 1st round pick, then
Deshaun Jackson's a lot older than Amari. Like your point is well received, and not everybody's going to be a trade genius like Jerry Jones, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't necessarily hate that. Here's the other thing that caught my eye. Everybody expected, and again, I don't know, I haven't had a chance to look at the latest with what's going on. Were you surprised that TJ Yeldon was listed as the starter today for Jacksonville, or do you think it was sort of, well, he's the guy that's been here the longest amount of time?
Yes, it's that. It's the familiarity factor as Carlos Hyde gets into the mix. Also, news came out about that today, that Leonard Fournette is expected to return after the Jaguars bye. So we'll see about that. So let's not all go crazy here and start celebrating because you never know with Leonard Fournette. But here's the situation, Ben, for those that had to deal with this morning. I benched Yeldon in every single league.
I did too. I mean, I actually moved on from him. I dropped him outright. Right. I dropped him outright to pick up Jalen Richard.
Right. And something else, just because in football, it's not like other sports, just because you're named the starter, you could be the starter for 3 snaps and that's it.
No doubt. I think that happened last week too, and I think for Duke Johnson was named the starter,
right,
and then we saw what ended up happening.
Yeah, so with that situation, just because in football, it's not like with basketball, for instance, you can expect your starters to at least get in the first quarter 5-6 minutes, expecting to get, unless they get in foul trouble, at least half the quarter. In this situation, just because you're named the starter, that can result in 2 snaps, and then they give it to the other guy.
Exactly. So I'm not necessarily bullish on there. Continuing to have opportunities to answer your guys' questions here on FSM Football Sunday. FENSTY, while we're waiting for some more questions to come in, I'm really curious to get your perspective on a game that probably has the highest amount of sort of, for lack of better terminology, fantasy goodness when you have Green Bay going to the Rams today. This is sort of one of those games where everybody is in play. You have Randall Cobb, you have Geronimo Allison coming back. Aaron Rodgers, I think the narrative has been discussed over and over again. This is the biggest underdog he's ever been coming into a game. Now, It makes sense because the Rams have demolished every team pretty much in their path. They are at home. And I know that Cooper Kupp is out, but everybody else on that team, even Marcus Peters, who had been struggling for the last couple of weeks, has gotten himself back on track. Curious to get your perspective on this game and if there's anybody maybe that you're for sure going to be on that sort of is outside the obvious here.
All right, well, let's talk about the spread first, and this is where we could bring in Vegas. This line was at 9 before. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, you said it. I mean, this has to be one of the biggest underdogs going in, and this is Aaron Rodgers we're talking about here, who's getting healthier every single week. Now the line, and now it's 7.5. So now people are starting to realize how ridiculous it was.
Well, it opened at 10, FENSTY.
I was shocked.
It opened at Rams minus 10. At one point, I was considering getting in on it at minus 9.5. Or plus 9.5 for the Packers, and just thought. And here's really quick. I'll let you get to your point, but I want to sort of let you know where the public is on this. As of about a day or two ago, when the line was at 9.5, you had 70% of the tickets on Green Bay. However, you had about 77% of the money on Green Bay. So what that indicates is that a lot of the sharp money was also on the Packers in this game. And so Vegas realized, man, we're going to take a huge hit. We got to move this line. So it looked like the pros were on this game for Aaron Rodgers for a while too.
Right, and also, by the way, not only that, but this was a few days ago before we knew the health status of Allison and Randall Cobb, who, by the way, because they were both, we didn't know if we were going to see them this week, and this is before that. Now, Allison is fully healthy and ready to go, but Randall Cobb, and you wanted to hear what I thought about this game, Randall Cobb is a very risky start. He's expected to play, but it seems to me, Ben, like Allison's going to get a lot more love in this offense, and even during bye weeks, unless I'm desperate, I'm keeping Randall Cobb on the bench. It might cost me, but a little bit nervous about that.
Yeah, I prefer Allison this week over Cobb, although Aaron Rodgers will throw to him. I think he doesn't have a problem going across the middle. He's going to exploit whatever matchups he can get. And Aaron Rodgers is the first time that he hasn't been on the injury report. So I think that's really encouraging for him. I just love both quarterbacks in this game. I think Rodgers is a fantastic play. If you're playing, I would consider playing both of them, not just on salary sites, but on fantasy sports markets as well. Like, I know you have Dalton, I know you have Big Ben, I know you have Mahomes, but I absolutely think Jared Goff is in play, even on a non-salary site.
For sure, for sure. Now, let me ask you this, Ben. If you had to pick one of these Rams receivers to have a share of, who are you going with between Cooks and Woods?
I always prefer Robert Woods. I know that Cooks is more the home run threat. I like the fact that Woods is sort of the guy that they move around to exploit the best matchups from. So I prefer him. They're going to line him up again probably about 60 to 65% of the time in the slot. And it's advantageous to him. And here's the thing. Robert Woods, I think, had 5 or 6 catches for about 78 yards last week, and people looked at that as a down game. For Robert Woods, like, this is sort of where things are at, where the expectations for him are really high right now, but reasonably so, because that's what the LA Rams' offense is capable of doing. Here, let me ask you this question, and I see questions coming in from Kyle. We got one more from PD Dubs, from Lou, from Canums on Periscope. We will get to all your guys' questions, I promise. Kyle, don't worry, you didn't miss your question. We will get to it coming up here in just a second. Here's what I want to know with regards to this game. Todd Gurley, if you are going to play non-salary DFS, I think without question Gurley is in your lineup week in and week out, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're looking at it from a collective, does Todd Gurley need to be in your lineup on a salary site? There's a lot of really good options. That you can make the argument.
Matchup.
James Conner.
Yep, Joe Mixon in a great situation today, who I love Joe Mixon. I have him in a lot of lineups. You mentioned James Conner before. David Johnson, let's not forget about that. Let's get that game, even though it's crap between Arizona and San Fran. I mean, I'm thinking David Johnson's going to have a pretty nice game today as well. So is he a lock on salary sites? The answer is no. Now, with some of the stars, if you're going stars and scrubs, then yes, I'm still fine with it, because we've mentioned a lot of people, and I haven't even mentioned Martavis Bryant yet, who, by the way, on salary sites would be a nice little value option for you. But I mentioned guys like Chris Herndon, so if you're going stars and scrubs and who's been a safety option in Gurley, that's fine. But I don't think it's required, Ben, with all the other great matchups for running backs.
Right. I think I just have to figure out on fantasy sports markets, besides Todd Gurley, who I want to pair with him, because I love the matchup for Hunt. I love the matchup for Phillip Lindsay going up against Kansas City with no Royce Freeman. James White, if you're getting it on a Sunday, Monday type game. And then Saquon Barkley is always in play, even with a really low total, just purely based on the volume that he gets.
They're going to him.
You think?
I know.
All right. From Kyle on Facebook Live, and apologize if we've already got this. Oh, you know what? We already did answer this question. It was between Stephon Diggs and Tyler Boyd. We both went with Tyler Boyd, right? No, I'm sorry. It was Boyd or Landry.
Yes.
So let's go back to Kyle's question. Stephon Diggs or Tyler Boyd?
Oh, my God.
That's another really hard one, and I'm looking at it purely, again, Tyler Boyd's got an incredible matchup, high floor, also high ceiling, whereas opposed to Diggs, his targets have been down the last couple of weeks. He's somebody, FENSTY, that I would highly recommend trying to go ahead and trade for as a buy low candidate, with Adam Thielen just consistently lighting it up. But I don't love the matchup for Diggs. I think he's going to be covered by and shadowed by Marshawn Lattimore with New Orleans. Obviously he broke free against the Saints the last time these two teams played for a pretty meaningful end of the game touchdown. But I think the safer play and probably the better play is Tyler Boyd.
I agree with that, and I say that. And look, when you're in this situation, and I am in a few leagues as well with Stephon Diggs, keep starting him. But, at some point, to take a risk on a Tyler Boyd is not even a risk because of how great the matchup is. And when looking at other matchups that slot receivers have, one of the best for sure in the weekend. So because of that, I have to go with Tyler Boyd here, even though, bigger plays, more points, higher ceiling, like you were saying, I go Tyler Boyd. But Stephon Diggs, like you said, a great buy low candidate. I never thought I'd say that. But when your teammate is the highest targeted receiver in the NFL, then that helps your selling point from the other side when getting him in terms of buying.
That's my biggest regret of the season is I had an opportunity, I think it was after week 2 or maybe week 3 in a 12-team half-point PPR league that I'm in, to pick up Tyler Boyd. And I was like, I'll just wait another week. and somebody jumped the gun on him, and now he's just been lighting it up all season. And I have good wide receivers on that team. I have Landry, and I have oh my God, who's my other top wide receiver? He's really good. This is gonna bother me, but I've been in a really good situation all year with that team with the wide receiver spot. Tyreek Hill, idiot. But like the fact that I could have had Tyler Boyd just right there on the waiver wire after like week 2, week 3, it's a killer.
That's why you got to look at in seasonal. That's why you got to look at guys like Martavis Bryant for bench depth at this point. Because
I really like his situation moving forward, actually.
Yeah, Jordy Nelson's going to see top coverage. And, they have Jared Cook, who will also see a good amount of coverage. He was productive, especially in the first few weeks.
Right.
But where does Martavis Bryant, where's his coverage? It's not going to be there at the start until he starts putting up Tyler Boyd-like numbers. So that's someone in seasonal that you could get right now that has a tremendous ceiling for the second half unless the Raiders make another trade for a receiver. But before we go back into another question, Ben, we have to talk about this injury with Matt Breida here.
Okay.
We've been burned before, and then for those that have started guys on snap counts, we've also benefited. Like we benefited with Corey Clement a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. He was able to get into the end zone and help out just enough. But then with Dalvin Cook a few weeks ago as well, we got burned by him on what they call a pitch count, a snap count, whatever you want to call it. It's not a good situation for Matt Breida.
Would you buy low on Dalvin Cook for the second half of the season?
I would. And I see a lot of people, and I own Dalvin Cook a lot, so I'm getting these trades like Alshon Jeffrey for Dalvin Cook. And I've been rejected because, receivers in a lot of my leagues, they're easier to come by than running backs. So remember that if you're a Dalvin Cook owner. But this is getting very frustrating here with Dalvin Cook because it's almost like a tease, and then he's out. You think he's going to be in? He's out. Now with Matt Breida, he's the new Will Fuller. He takes the torch of the guy that's on the injury report every single week.
Right.
And now today, according to Adam Schefter, he's going to be on a snap limit in this matchup, which I loved him in this matchup. So Mostert at this point is the safer option. But for those that are desperate, Ben, and have Matt Breida, let's say, in 2 flex leagues, and they need to fill that spot, are they forced to put him in?
I think a lot of it is also based on who else you have, but
I'm going to give you a situation.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
Matt Breida versus Buck Allen.
Ooh. Baltimore's on the road. Carolina's slight favorite. Game script is likely to PPR or not?
PPR.
I'd probably go Buck Allen.
It's close. It's very close.
Yeah,
that's the situation I'm in the league right now.
I think I would go. I think I'd go Bucks.
You would.
Only because I know that he's going to be on the field. He's going to get pass catching opportunities. Collins, I have Collins everywhere. I invested heavily in him. I'm not thrilled about the matchup this week for him against Carolina on the road, because I just think at some point Baltimore likes to pass, and they like having him on the field in pass protection. And so Flacco throws the ball a ton. It just feels like it's going to be a Buck Allen game this week.
Ben, I'm putting my eggs into your basket this week with this call, because this is a situation that not only I'm dealing with, but I've gotten this question at FENSTY Sports on Twitter as well. It's a tough call.
It's a really tough call.
Snap count, and we've seen it. We've gotten burned before if you own Dalvin Cook. So I don't know how you start Matt Breida today. If he gets a touchdown and you're upset that you didn't start him, you're playing it safe.
Exactly. Yeah, like you're looking for the guaranteed points in this spot. I see questions coming in from Cannons or Canums. I don't know why there's another N there, but it's Canums. From Lou Brown. We won a game yesterday. And from Roger over on Periscope. So let's get to those right after PD Dubs. He wants to know any concerns about starting Cam Newton today. He's an auto start, in my opinion, in season long. It's a tough matchup, man. Like, it's at home against Baltimore. Baltimore's probably been the best, most consistent defense in the NFL this year. But I think Cam is one of those guys that... Here's what I'll say. I think Cam will run a bunch today. I think he'll probably rush in for a touchdown. Maybe he'll find a Devin Funchess or Greg Olsen across the middle. I don't know if you're necessarily going to be able to exploit them with Christian McCaffrey in the running game. I think Cam's in play, but I do think he'll turn the ball over.
I mean, if this is a daily question, and I think this guy's it's a seasonal.
It sounds like a season long.
Okay, if you have the room, just check the waiver wire. Just check the waiver wire. Because if you're trying to play at matchup, now when you have a quarterback, you start him every week. Like, I'm going to start my quarterback that I've drafted, especially if I paid up a little bit for quarterback every single week. That's why you did it. So there's that mindset. But what happens if you see a guy like, I don't know, Mitchell Trubisky on the waiver wire, and you're just trying to play the matchup?
And honestly, I'd start Cam over Trubisky this week with the weather concerns.
Right.
Mitch is already having a hard time throwing the ball accurately in beautiful weather. You got like 20 to 30 mile per hour winds. I don't want a lot of Trubisky, although he might run a lot today. So maybe that's an encouraging sign too. But Mitch will throw a couple of picks today.
You know, there are guys with better matchups, but if you have Cam and you paid a little bit of a premium for him, then you're going to have to roll with him every week, because good quarterbacks can produce against the toughest of defenses.
Would you do Cam or Stafford at home against Seattle?
Oh, that's a really tough one. I would probably do Cam. I'd probably still roll with Cam, because with Cam it's different. He's going to vulture a touchdown.
Yes, he is.
It's going to happen. You're getting that vulture touchdown from him. If he's within the 4-yard line, it's Cam for 2 plays, first and second down.
Okay, let's get to Major League Lou Brown over here. PPR league, 2 spots between Michael Crabtree, Chris Godwin, or Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And then he has a quarterback toss-up with Matthew Stafford or Russell Wilson, who coincidentally enough are playing each other today. Well, we kind of talked about both of them. Let's start with the quarterback spot, Fensty. That Stafford and Wilson are in these weird situations where both of these guys used to be huge, constantly throwing the ball all over the field, easily racking up 300-plus yards, couple of touchdowns, and you're starting to see more of a running game feel for both of these teams. Like, they're just relying on their running backs more than they have in years past. I like the matchup slightly more for Stafford, but I also think Wilson has the better opportunity to pass for more yards and possibly more touchdowns, being a road dog. So what do you think between Stafford and Wilson?
I think that makes the matchup more favorable to Russell Wilson then, in that, because of what you just said.
It's a more favorable matchup in that sense, but the better team as far as going up against defenses, I think, is Detroit at home. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, Wilson's going to get more volume, but the better matchup is for Stafford.
Right. That's close. That's for sure. I'm going to still go with Russell Wilson in this.
Okay.
Very close here.
I think I'm going to stay with Stafford, actually. I think I like the matchup against Seattle's corners. I know you mentioned that they're top 10. Stafford has so many good options to throw to. Just so many elite level dudes. Like, I know we've been down on Marvin Jones, but he's still one of the leaders in the NFL in air yards. He's still a deep threat every time he touches the ball. Tate is super reliable across the middle. And Kenny Golladay, man, when your nickname is Babytron, like, things are working out for you, right?
Oh, man.
Right? Like, so I would go with Stafford. FENSTY and I disagree on this one.
The total does show, though, that at being at 48, there are going to be points scored in this game.
Correct.
So, but the other question, eliminate Valdez-Scantling.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Crabtree's been getting a ton of volume, just not a lot with it. And then Godwin's in a really nice spot going up against Cincinnati as well. I think we got time for maybe another question or two before we go through our favorite plays for fantasy sports markets today. This is from Roger on Periscope. Says, Will Fuller went down on Thursday. Any wide receivers I could pick up before football starts for Week 9 onwards?
We just mentioned someone.
We did.
Maybe Martavis Bryant.
Martavis is certainly available. We can look at a couple different, waiver wire candidates, but I think Martavis is probably the guy that I really like. I'm trying to think of another couple of names that just sort of make sense that are sort of living on the waiver
one, Ben.
wire. Yeah,
he's available in daily for today. What about Rashard Matthews, who was just signed by the Jets?
I got a better one for you, and it's another Jet, and a guy that burned a ton of people recently, Jermaine Kearse.
Another one too.
Like,
another
there's no more Terrell Pryor. Robbie Anderson's a little bit banged up. Like, and Noon was still out with injury. Like, Kearse is going to occupy that slot, and we know that more often than not, Darnold's going to throw the ball in that area. So I almost wonder if Kearse is the guy maybe ahead of somebody like Rashard Matthews.
Right. That's a good point there. More familiar with the offense, so you've got options there as well.
A guy that I've seen end up on a lot of waiver wires recently is Nelson Aguilar. Always a ton of targets. The problem is that he's not getting any yards, and he's not getting a whole lot of yards after the catch. I know he's already played, but if he's talking about Week 9 and beyond, maybe that's a guy that you can possibly look at as well. Right.
No, if he's out there, then, again, while you still think that they could be good suitors for Deshaun Jackson, there's still room for him there.
Absolutely. So, and I almost think that if they get Deshaun,
for this, not this week, but for next week, then he's fine.
Right. And I think if they do get Deshaun, I almost think it helps him. Right? Just take away some maybe he loses a couple targets, but I think it gives him better coverage down the middle of the field. Guys aren't worried about him as much. In that sense, right? Does that make sense? Can you hear me, FENSTY? Did you lose me? Hello? Oh, we might have lost FENSTY for the final part of the show. Not sure what happened there. But I guess you guys are just stuck with me for the final 2 minutes. This is a little bit interesting. Occasionally some technical difficulties come down here. If somebody who is watching on Facebook Live or on Periscope, can you guys just throw in a chat and make sure that you guys can hear me as we're heading in? Our record is going, so when we post the audio version, that should be fine as well to make sure that works. So let's get to a couple favorite plays over for fantasy sports markets for a little bit later on today. Let's talk about the quarterback position. We know Mahomes is always going to be in play. He's consistent. He's always going to be somebody that you look to, especially when you don't have to worry about the salary. You can pair him up with so many different guys. Aaron Rodgers. I love both him and Jared Goff today. Petey, I appreciate the fact that you guys can hear me. Thank you guys so much. We'll make sure that we let FENSTY know maybe some technical difficulties on his end. Other guys that I like this week, we talked about Jameis Winston. I think Kirk Cousins is in play against the Saints defense. I know that Diggs might be taken away, but you can pass on New Orleans, especially in the middle of the field. Highly advise that you guys go back and listen to that Friday podcast that I did with Elliot Chris from the Quan Edge, where we break down each game individually. And he talked about the opportunity where this is just another smash spot for Adam Thielen. Jared Goff, Ben Roethlisberger, and Andy Dalton. One sneaky guy, if you want to go ahead and play him just because of how good he's been all year long, is Drew Brees. This is a revenge game for the New Orleans Saints on the road at Minnesota. We know what happened in that game last year in the postseason. So I wonder whether or not Breeze might be a little bit sneaky with Michael Thomas. At the running back spot, a couple of guys I like. Clearly, Todd Gurley, if you're playing on fantasy sports markets, is always going to be in play. Saquon Barkley, purely based on the volume and targets and opportunities that he gets for the Giants, he's in play as well. Guys that I like include James Conner, really good matchup, good opportunity against Cleveland today. James White with no Sony Michel, at least as to what we would anticipate for today. Kareem Hunt, we talked about him before, how it's just a very advantageous matchup at home against Denver. And we talked about David Johnson as well. Philip Lindsay also, I should mention, in play as well. Let's see if we can get FENSTY back for these final minute or two. FENSTY, you back with us? Can you hear us?
I'm back with you, baby.
All right, there we go. We got it all figured out. We're going through some of our favorite running back plays as we wrap up the show for week number 8. I mentioned that the clear-cut guys are always going to be Gurley and Barkley and Connor. James White, Kareem Hunt certainly in the mix this week. You mentioned Tariq Cohen, David Johnson before. Any other?
Joe Mixon, don't forget about him too,
Joe
Ben.
Mixon, and I mentioned Philip Lindsay as well. Any sleeper running backs that you might be in on today?
It's funny you mentioned Philip Lindsay because I actually also think he has one of the best matchups as well. I mean, you mentioned, Kerryon Johnson.
Yeah.
Because we are seeing more love given to the run game, and why not with Kerryon Johnson? Because, I mean, Ben, you love him. We've been talking all show, so it's on salaried sites for sure, Kerryon Johnson. Non-salary, you might want to throw him in a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's certainly an intriguing play. Wide receiver spot, if you include the Sunday night game, Adam Thielen once again in another fantastic opportunity. Doesn't have to worry about coverage from Marshawn Lattimore. That's going to be occupied by Stephon Diggs, so Cousins is just going to go his way. Love a stack of Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen, and running it back with maybe somebody like Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas if you want action on fantasy sports markets there. Clearly, Antonio Brown, A.J. Green, Odell Beckham in the mix as well, though there's not a lot of points that are going to be up for grabs in New York and Washington. Maybe somebody, if you're looking for a sneaky play, FENSTY, I guess on fantasy sports markets, Robert Woods would be in that conversation.
What about Juju Smith-Schuster?
It's a really good pivot off of Antonio Brown. Absolutely. Right. If you're buying in on Big Ben, and I'm going to have a lineup stacking a lot of Steelers today, I absolutely want Juju Smith-Schuster in the lineup. And pure value, your guy Martavis Bryant is a guy. I'm not touching him on FSM, but if you're playing on the salary sites, he's in a great spot. Anybody else that we're missing?
I mean, if there's somebody, we have to talk about Jarvis Landry again. I mean, still in a good matchup as well. So with Jarvis Landry, I really want to attack this Pittsburgh-Cleveland game from the Cleveland side. But Duke Johnson, after this show, on my mind's inception now, Ben.
I'm telling you, I think Duke will actually have a decent game today. That's sort of my bold take of the week here. And then finally, at the tight end spot, the clear-cut guy, clearly Travis Kelce in that game against Denver. But if you're looking for some value, George Kittle once again in play for San Francisco on the road at Arizona. Trey Burton with no Allen Robinson. He had a great game last week. Should see plenty of targets, especially with bad weather and wind. A lot of shorter passes likely today from Trubisky. What about O.J. Howard? Run after the catch has been awesome for him this year, FENSTY, and especially in a game that's going to have a lot of points. Tampa going to Cincinnati. If you're running it back with Andy Dalton and A.J. Green, might be good to have some exposure to O.J. Howard in this game.
Yeah, not a bad option at all. You're not scared of Braid at all?
No, only, and I asked Elliot that question too, and he sort of talked me out of it in the sense that like Braid vultured a touchdown. That was pretty much it. That's all he did. Howard's getting he's dominating the snap counts, dominating the opportunities. I know Winston has looked his way, but I think the emergence of Howard is taking that away.
What about Vance McDonald? Again, that Cleveland-Pittsburgh game.
So I dropped Uzoma as a backup to Gronk to pick up Vance McDonald because I felt long-term he was the better play. And Uzoma has the best matchup of the season. Bucks worst in the NFL at stopping the tight end spot. To me, it was worth it to make sure I got McDonald. So
he's getting in the end zone again, by the way, this week.
Uzoma?
Yes, I think he's going to not only get in the end zone, he's going to get more targets. Only a couple last week. This week, he's going to get about 4 or 5 targets at least, and one of them is going to be for a touchdown.
So there you go. Those are our favorite plays at FantasySportsMarkets.com. We'll put the promo code up one more time for you guys that haven't had a chance to play. It is DFS without the annoying salary. So go make a lineup. It takes about a minute or two if you know the guys that you want to play. And it's a lot of fun. Follow it and track it throughout the day. There's the Beat Benny Heis contest, which is closing in fast. Of course, our $5, $10 contest. All of them available for you guys as well. Remember, promo code NFL18 gets you $5 on us. FENSTY, where can people find you and read and listen to you?
Everywhere. No, I'm just kidding. FantasyAlarm.com.
You're not, though, because you're everywhere.
FantasyAlarm.com, helping all your fantasy basketball needs there from the football and basketball side. SiriusXM, Fantasy Sports Radio, every single Saturday, 6 to 8 a.m. Eastern. Wake Up Fantasy Sports. Again, you will lose weight from this show with all the energy that's going to be coming through your airwaves there. And also at FENSTY Sports on Twitter.
There you go. He's FENSTY. I'm Ben. Thank you guys for watching. We will be back at a special time next week. It's going to be a little bit earlier, 9 a.m. East Coast time, 8 a.m. Central time. But I think that's also the week, FENSTY, that we gain an hour of sleep. So maybe it's actually works out to our favor. It's okay.
A lot of sleep, no sleep. We're going to dominate.
That's right. So thank you guys for watching. It's always a lot of fun being and doing this show with you guys and for participating. Always appreciate all you guys being involved with us. For FENSTY, I'm Ben. Good luck in week number 8. We'll see you guys next week on FSM Football Sunday Live. Be good.
Let's win.